but Chicago has had a very colorful past. And I think it's only within the last 10 years or so that women's history has really come to the forefront. And so it's with great delight that I can bring these ladies to you tonight. Now, I hope that you will bear with me in between characters. I'm just going to turn around over to this table, take a little bit something off, all in good taste, and put a little something on to become the other woman. So there'll be just a minute interval between each character. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Bertha Palmer. Good evening. 'Tis wonderful to be here tonight. I am Bertha Honore Palmer, or sometimes people call me Mrs. Potter Palmer. I was born in the South, and my family moved to Chicago when I was just a very little girl. I met my future husband when I was 13 years old, and he was 33. He liked to tell our eldest son, Honore, how he recognized in me a young girl who would grow up to be not only a loving wife and mother, but a woman who would be capable of entertaining in the style that he wanted. So he decided to wait for me to grow up. He was busy during that period of time. In fact, by the time he was 40, he was worth over $7 million. He owned a store, at which point he sold it off to Marshall Fields and Levi Leiter. And for a while, it was Palmer, Fields, and Leiter, now known as Marshall Fields. My husband was somewhat of a very hard-working person and known for his honesty. He also initiated something whose popularity has endured: credit. Now, when I was 21 and he was 44, we were wed in the First Christian Church of Chicago. He had been raised a Quaker, but a week before our marriage was baptized into the church. During this period of time, he was building a beautiful edifice called the Palmer House. He had designed a whole suite of rooms for us to live in. But first we went off on our wedding cruise across the water and over to Europe. What a wonderful time that was. And do you know what my husband gave me as a wedding gift? The $3,500,000 Palmer House. The rooms were not quite ready when we returned, and so we were living in a home when the Great Fire of Chicago hit. And of course, the Palmer House burned with so many other wonderful buildings in Chicago. We took in relatives and virtual strangers into our home, which was spared until they could relocate. My husband and other leaders of Chicago borrowed heavily to rebuild, only to be hit by a financial panic in 1873 and yet another fire in 1874. Fortunately, this time, the Palmer House was spared. Our two sons were born at the Palmer House, Honore and Potter Jr. People have said of my husband and myself that we are cold. Not so. We may be perfectionists. We expected a lot of one another and therefore of others. However, my husband did have an enduring nickname for me. He called me Sissy. If I could explain to you what my life was like, you would understand that a woman of my social stature was involved in a great deal of social interchange. I was a member of the Saddle and Cycle Club, the Amwencia Club, the Tuesday Arts and Travel Club, and for a while, I was a trustee of Northwestern University. Well, we outgrew our rooms at the Palmer House, and so my husband filled in the marshy area of North Lake Shore Drive, and there he built a turreted house known as Palmer Castle. It was designed in the flavor of King Louis XVI, and people like to come to our home just to see its elegance and its beauty. But if I had to pick out the one event that stands out in my life above all others, it would have to be the Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair. Why, what an exciting time for women. I was an advocate of women's education and not dependence on husbands. In fact, I had organized the milliners who met in my very own living room, who fought for and won better working conditions and pay. So can you imagine, here I thought is an opportunity for women all around the world to be recognized and their input. Well, I sought their input all over. I traveled to Europe, talked not only to royalty, but to the common woman as well. On my return to Chicago, the woman that I had left in charge, Phoebe W. Cousins, a well-known lawyer and suffragette, who didn't particularly like men, had managed to alienate all the fair officials. We lost our representation and our financial backing. I fired her. She took me to civil court. But she lost and I won and had to build bridges to get better representation. Oh, what can I tell you, though, about that? Our building, the Italian Renaissance style, designed by a woman architect, Sophie Hayden. It was overlooking a beautiful lagoon. Do you know, shortly after it was finished, Sophie Hayden had a nervous breakdown. The male architect said it only went to prove women should not be architects. Obviously, I did not agree with that. Well, it was so exciting when the fair finally opened. Our building was filled with artists done just by women artists. When Susan B. Anthony asked me for more space, I gave it to her. You know, Mary Cassatt had a wall with an entire mural on it. Opening ceremonies, a 500-person choir, singing the Columbian March, the Hallelujah Chorus, and I was introduced to the visiting fair dignitaries. I was wearing a yellow satin and velvet gown, and I stood before the people and I said, "What a marvelous occasion this is. Tonight we gather not only to celebrate Columbus's discovery of America, we have come to celebrate the government's discovery of women." I loved all of the fair activities, but I received one of the most talked about snubs in all of history. Spain sent the Infanta, Iulela, and she made certain that you pronounced her name with each syllable, Iulela. They sent her to add elegance to the Spanish exhibit. Well, she was a character. She shocked everyone at Mayor Carter Harrison's lively little fair breakfast by pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. I had planned an elegant dinner party in her honor, with a special dais where she would sit and greet the visiting fair dignitaries. At that breakfast, at Mayor Carter Harrison's breakfast, she discovered that I, Bertha Palmer, was the wife of Potter Palmer, owner of the Palmer House. She said, "I will not go to any party given at the home of the wife of an innkeeper." Well, I must tell you, the Spanish ambassador told her while she was in Chicago, she could not snub Mrs. Potter Palmer. We had given her the royal suite at the Palmer House. I had sent over my own gold plate and silver. She had a retinue of servants at her beck and call. But the night of my dinner party, in typical Chicago fashion, wind-swept rain off of the lake. Iulela was furious. There was no canopy or red carpet to take her to her car. Only the doorman with his umbrella to keep her satin gown from becoming speckled with rain. She arrived at my home, swept past me to the dais that I'd set aside, and for the next hour, she managed to snub Marshall Field, Philip Armour, Vice President Adlai Stevenson, Russian princes and prince, why, the governor of New York and Tennessee, after which she came before me, lodged a protest, and before dinner was even served, waltzed out into the cold, rainy night. Well, I continued with my dinner party as if nothing had happened. The following day, the incident was reported in the newspapers. We did have to share it with the terrible tragedy of the collapse of the Ford Theater in Washington, D.C., and the death of 22 people. But in the article about my party, I came off smelling like a rose, and the Infanta like a cabbage. Needless to say, for her remainder of her visit, she treated me very well and behaved herself. Years later, we actually became friends. I think she felt that since I had been received into King Edward's court, that I was of some account. And as for me, I really am not the kind of woman who bears a grudge. Between you and me, I was awfully fond of that innkeeper. Before I bring Jane Addams out, let me just tell you that he died at age 79 of edema, she at 69 of cancer, and Palmer Castle was torn down in the 1950s, and in its place stands an ugly 1950s high-rise, another one of our historical buildings that was lost. During the Second World War, interestingly enough, Palmer Castle was a surgical dressing station, and I think that that's a use that both Bertha and Potter Palmer would have approved of.
Looking for some fresh ideas for food?
That's great.
Check out these and other cooking shows on the Library Cable Network.
We're going to talk about the preparation for the different ingredients that go in there and things that you can do at home to do something similar to what we do, and then we'll talk about some variations on that.
I am a seasonal girl. I do not eat or work with anything that is not in season, no matter what time of the year it is. So this is why I'm here tonight, to try to give you another choice.
Everything with me, everything here is simple. I don't believe in showing you something so complicated that you are just here, you look at it, and never reproduce it in your kitchen. Well, as long as you are my new family.
In India, you've got a food system which is 2,000, 3,000 years old. And just now, people are starting to discover some of the benefits, the health benefits.
And probably most of you are just thinking of incorporating some soy into the diet. There's a lot of information on soy, a lot of the different health benefits to soy.
Call us for a free monthly cable guide at 506-2662.
Stick your finger in there and you go, ouch!
And that's what we like.
Or check out these great recipes on our website at www.librarytv.org. The Library Cable Network.
It's so flavorful.
I'm so good.
Are you hungry yet?
You guys want to eat something?
Good evening. You know, it's been said that I ran a hull of a house. I'm Jane Addams with 2 Ds now. I was born in Cedarville, Illinois, which is 6 miles north of Freeport. Some people think I was a Chicago girl, but I was not. In fact, I was a fortunate young woman. I was born into a period where women could start thinking about a career. My mother had no such opportunity. My father was, well, my role model. He was the essence of the self-made American man. He ran the mill in Cedarville, and he was state senator for over 20 years. He fought for better conditions in insane asylums, in prisons, and in normal schools. No, my father was a wonderful man. My mother, bless her heart, had no opportunity to be anything other than a housewife. She cooked for over 20 mill hands every day. She made our rugs, our carpets, our clothes, and she had to steel herself early on for tragedy. She lost one baby at 2 months, another at 10 months, and another at 2 years. My poor mother, when she was pregnant with her 9th child, went out to help a woman in labor when the doctor wasn't available. On her way home, she tripped and fell. She lost the baby. 2 weeks later, she died. I was just 2 years old. But don't feel sorry for me. I had 2 wonderful older sisters, Mary and Martha, and they just doted on me. And they were my life, along with my father, until Martha died suddenly of typhoid when I was 6. And later on, Mary went off to Rockford Seminary and married a Presbyterian minister named John Lynn. At that time, my life changed. Father remarried a woman named Anna. Anna, she was cultured and intelligent. She brought literature, music, the theater into our home. I think it's because of her that in my life I felt comfortable wherever I went, whether it was in the best aristocratic home or if it was in a humble dwelling. I was comfortable. Well, I told Anna that I wanted to do something important with my life. What that was, I wasn't sure. I would have to wait till I grew up. When it came time for me to go to college, and I knew that I wanted to go to college, I was accepted at Smith. My father said, "No, Jane, no, no, no. That's too far away from home." So I went to Rockford College. It was no longer called a seminary. There I met a woman who would be a lifelong friend, Ellen Gates Starr. Oh, she too wanted to do something special with her life. After 2 years at Rockford, my father suddenly died of a ruptured appendix. And I again was accepted at Smith. This time I traveled there only to become very ill. I had had a very sickly childhood. The most serious thing had been tuberculosis of the spine, which has left me a bit stooped and somewhat pigeon-toed. But I recuperated and went to Philadelphia Women's Medical College, thinking perhaps I would become a doctor. I got so ill again I had to return to Cedarville. My stepbrother, who was a surgeon, he said, "Jane, all of your problems stem from your spine. You need surgery." So I allowed him to operate. I was an invalid for over 6 months. But then my brother, who had taken over the mill after Father's death, had a nervous breakdown, and it forced me up out of my sickbed and to run the mill. After he recuperated, I made the first of 3 trips to London, England. And there, exciting things were happening. There was a settlement house by the name of Toynbee Hall. And here were university graduates, in this case mostly men, but instead of giving alms to the poor, they were actually living and working amongst the poor to change their lot. I came home and said to Ellen Gates Starr, "That's what we need in Chicago." Obviously, Cedarville, things didn't seem to be so different between the haves and the have-nots. So I went to all of the religious institutions, the Chicago Women's Club, any organization we could think of for support. We didn't want to be allied with any one of them. And then we went looking for a place. We found the old Charles J. Hull mansion on the corner of Halstead and Polk in one of the worst neighborhoods of Chicago. You should have seen it when we bought it. Oh, the first floor was a saloon and rooms to let. The second floor was a furniture warehouse, and the third floor was a funeral parlor. We had our work cut out, most definitely. I took my inheritance from my father, and we rebuilt Hull House. And we made it look like a beautiful home, not an institution. We wanted people from our neighborhood to come and to feel that there was a wonderful place to not be crowded like their tenements, where they could enjoy art and conversation. You know, I learned early on that the poor have as deep appreciation for art as anyone. Why, we had paintings on our wall which they could borrow and take to their tenements to brighten their lives. Our neighborhood was mostly Italian, with some German and a few Polish. When we opened up the doors to Hull House, they flocked to us, I think at first out of curiosity. Well, we had evenings in Italian, evenings in German, boys' club, girls' club, cooking classes, sewing classes, and we started a kindergarten, which was all the rage in Europe. We had 23 little children. Julie Dow, from a prominent Chicago family, had such enthusiasm, and she ran it for no salary. In 1891, there were 6 settlement houses. By 1900, there were well over 100. It was, of course, a national movement, and Hull House was always at the forefront. I was always there, and I never took 1 penny of salary. Oh, people have criticized me over the years. Some have said I was too radical. Others said I was not radical enough. I considered myself a middle-of-the-road person. Oh, certainly I got involved in labor disputes, but some people thought I was a socialist or an anarchist or should be deported. You know, they called me anti-religion, all kinds of things. Where people got these ideas, I don't know. But where I really garnered my reputation as a reformer was over garbage. Our ward was the poorest ward in the city. Garbage collection, in some cases, was almost non-existent. People threw their refuse in the middle of the street. At one time, we tried to install an incinerator at Hull House. It only made matters worse. Finally, after stepping over yet another dead horse and the terrible smell from the slaughterhouses, I went right to the mayor. I said, "Mayor Harrison, we must do something about cleaning up that ward." Do you know what he did? He appointed me garbage commissioner for $1,000 a year. Oh, I worked so hard and got nowhere. I discovered why. Our own alderman, John Powers, one of the most powerful men in the city, head of the finance committee. When his rich railway buddies wanted money, he gave it to them. When we needed new schools, he gave money for a new parochial school. I tried to tell the neighbors, but they wouldn't believe me because he was one smart politician. Oh, sure. He'd get an occasional job for someone, and then on Thanksgiving, he'd hand out turkeys. So finally, I resigned my position as garbage commissioner. At one point, I was about to receive an honorary degree from Cornell College in Iowa. At the same time, President McKinley was assassinated by an avowed anarchist. The Chicago police began rounding up anyone that had anything to do with anarchy. Well, there was a lovely gentleman by the name of Abraham Isaacs who published an article newsletter. He was not radical, and I was not an anarchist, but I believed in freedom of speech. So I went right to the mayor after they jailed him, confiscated all his books, including William Shakespeare, because if it was in his house, it must be in sedentary, and I protested. He was released from prison. That made me very unpopular with a number of people. Rocks were thrown through the windows of Hull House, and I didn't receive my honorary degree. Oh no, the clergy of Chicago said, "We have no criticism of Miss Addams' intellectual achievements, but because she allows card playing and billiards at Hull House, she is contributing to the already low morals of the poor." Well, I could not care less about honorary degrees. To me, what was most important was to help those in my ward. Oh, we were asked to do things I never would have dreamt. One day, a young woman ran into Hull House. She was hysterical. She said, "There's a young girl in the tenement down the street, and she's unmarried and having a baby, and because she's unmarried, no one will help her." Julia Lathrop and I delivered our first baby, and it wasn't our last. No, we did important things at Hull House. We were important to our neighborhood and valued. However, when World War II came, I am a pacifist, and I did not want us to become involved in the war. Again, I was criticized as anti-American, and deportation suggested. I said, "I can't help what my feelings are, but I hate war and killing." But then came the Depression, And once again, my popularity soared. There were so many people that needed so very much. I have dedicated my life to helping the poor. I was at the forefront of a new movement, urban sociology. In our place of Hull House and other settlement houses, university graduates, both men and women, had an opportunity to learn as well as to help. And I would devote my entire life to wiping out prostitution and juvenile delinquency. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking for bread recipes, and let's see. Oh, that looks great. Okay. Let's see what that is. Oh, that's perfect. They'll love this. Great. Hi, I'm Bill Pardue, Electronic Resources Specialist at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library. You might be aware that the internet is becoming an ever more powerful research tool, but sometimes you might need a source that's a little bit more authoritative than your average website. When you visit your local library, you'll often find they have access to powerful databases that let you look up published articles, business data, health information, and more from thousands of sources that aren't available to the average internet user. For example, this database, the InfoTrack General Reference Center, lets you look up articles from over 1,000 popular magazines and reference sources, and it will have the full articles from hundreds of those magazines. You might notice that it looks just like a website, and it is made available to many libraries over the web. But unlike most websites, its information is for subscribing libraries only. Your library may have access to InfoTrack online or on CD-ROM, as well as other popular library databases such as EBSCOhost, ProQuest, Electric Library, First Search, Newsbank for looking up articles, and such specialized databases as Reference USA or FIS Online for looking up phone numbers or stock information online. There are also specialized databases for health information, literary criticism, biographies, and much, much more. Each library chooses its own databases, and there are hundreds on the market. Contact your library to find out exactly which databases they have available. As an added bonus, they may enable you to get into their databases from home or work. So remember, if you need a source that's more authoritative than the internet, look for it at your library.
Tommy? I'll play catch with you.
No, thanks.
Daddy'll be home soon.
But he's late. I thought you forgot about me.
Oh, never, Tommy. Daddy did something really, really stupid.
Hey, what happened?
Just running by the tracks and the train was coming and slipped and fell, slipped and fell.
Barbara Sears Rockefeller likes to say that all Rockefellers are eccentric. She points to Aunt Alta Rockefeller Prentice, who lived in a vast estate in Massachusetts and collected old automobiles. She also likes to talk about Ethel Rockefeller, who changed her name to Geraldine, married Marsilius Huntley Dodge. They lived in a vast estate in New Jersey in separate mansions. She collected dogs. There was William G. Rockefeller, a chronic alcoholic, who loved fire. He managed to don helmet and hold hose at 2 major conflagrations. But Barbara Sears Rockefeller likes to say that I, Edith Rockefeller McCormick, am the most eccentric of them all. I shall let you all be the judge of that. No one would have ever dreamed that as a young girl, with my hair in demure brown curls, with riding my bicycle being my favorite activity, and as I grew older teaching Sunday school, who would have ever thought that I would become the social tour de force that I would in Chicago? Oh, my dears, when I first came to Chicago, it was positively barbarous. Do you know the street guides actually directed the visitors to well-known brothels? There was a saloon keeper by the name of Mickey Finn. He made a concoction that he said was raw alcohol soaked in snuff with some ingredients from a voodoo doctor. When those clients that were unfortunate enough to drink it found themselves comatose, stacked up in the back room, and they were relieved of their belongings. Well, this then was the Chicago that I, Edith Rockefeller McCormick, came to give its dress tales. Mrs. Potter Palmer was the Dowager Queen of Chicago. It was just after, of course, the World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition, that I arrived. I intended to launch myself into Chicago society in some spectacular way. Now, I had 4 children in rapid succession. My second youngest, Muriel, was my favorite. When she was of kindergarten age, I began the kindergarten, which was all the rage in Europe. I appropriated my mother-in-law's ballroom, and only the creme de la creme of Chicago society was invited, and the McCormick relatives. My school was taught in French. I called it Mon Lycée. The games and lessons in French. And then I launched myself with some spectacular appearances. Now, Mrs. Potter Palmer may have had more jewels than I did, but hers were not as spectacular. I had one necklace of 12 huge emeralds on a chain of 1,567 diamonds, designed by Cartier. Another made out of the Russian crown jewels. And would you please feast your eyes on my perfect set of $2 million pearls. Now, we lived in a beautiful home on Lakeshore Drive, which I designed the interiors to look like they came right out of the French court. You know, the Rockefellers say they're descendant from the Germans, but don't you think that Rockefeller sounds like that famous French family, Rochefoucauld? I often signed my letters, Edith de la Rockefeller. Now, I, as you can imagine, gave many dinner parties. They were spectacular. I had all the menus printed in French for my little dinner parties for 200 in gold leaf. A simple luncheon for 4 required 4 butlers. At my dinner, there was a butler behind every other chair. But you know, one night I asked my husband, I said, darling, why do my dinners seem more like state occasions and lack the spontaneity of others? He said, Edith, red-blooded Chicagoans like their alcohol. Now, when I was a girl, I may have rebelled against hymn singing in my home, but I made a vow to my father that alcohol would never touch these lips, nor would it be served in my home. And I never relented. Why, there was intoxication to be had in my beautiful home. You know, I should also tell you that I am the reincarnation of King Tutankhamun's childhood bride, Asa Esenpa'aten. My home needed a whole wonderful retinue of servants. I had an upstairs maid, downstairs maid, one who polished the silver, one who just did the flowers, one who wound the clocks. I had my own maid who had her assistant, who was the sewing woman, who had her assistant, who was the mending woman, and no fewer than 6 detectives at any time. 2 French chefs that cooked on coal-burning stoves. I would not allow gas in my house. I didn't know any of their names, and they were not allowed to speak to me, except for my chief steward and private secretary. There was no need. When I went out, the chauffeur was given written instructions on where I was to go. Only once was an exception made, and that's when my eldest son lay ill with scarlet fever in our Lake Forest summer home. Word came during my dinner party that he had died. I'd shushed the butler away. Now, I don't understand why people criticized me. After all, He was dead, and my duty lay with my guests who were still alive. I was a patron of the opera. I would arrive in my plum-colored Rolls Royce, my chauffeur in matching outfit, and I would emerge from my vehicle with my perfect cape of ermine of 275 skins that fell like a tent around me. Sometimes I would lift my skirt to show my slender young ankles, around which I wore an ankle bracelet, a fashion that I started in Chicago. Well, one thing I could not stand, though, was scandal. And I couldn't stand tardiness. So at my pre-opera dinners, people learned to eat quickly or go to the opera hungry. I kept a little jeweled clock right next to my place. And I gave 6 minutes for the first course, and I rang a little bell, and the footman reached over and removed the plates. 7.5 minutes for the fish course. I rang my little bell, and the butlers leaned over and removed the plates. You ate quickly or went to the opera hungry. We were never late. Speaking of opera, though, I brought to Chicago what could have been its most lucrative opera, Salome, sung by none other than Mary Garden. Mary Garden was even too much for barbarous Chicago. She had, according to her, well, had many legions of lovers, and even rumored she had an illegitimate child. Add to this incendiary mixture the fact that, well, everyone liked Richard Strauss, who was doing the music, but it was based on a play by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde had made a visit to Chicago a few years before. He arrived at the same time as John L. Sullivan, who had just won the world's heavyweight title. Everyone said of John L. Sullivan, the all-American athlete, and of Oscar Wilde, who sat on a divan, swathed in fur lap robes and silk scarves, smelling a nosegay of flower for art's sake. They called him behind his back an aesthete. This was then the mixture that I was bringing Salome to Chicago. Opening night was a sold-out performance. Oh, often when I attended the opera, people came just to see me. But that night, they came to see Salome and Mary Garden. After her performance, the police chief steward came to me and said, her dance with the head of the prophet on a platter was like a cat wallowing around in a bed of catnip. She's got to tone that down. The next night, he sent his chief censor, who said to me, unless Mary Garden tones down that dance, the opera must close. Well, I approached her. She refused, said it would compromise her artistry. And so what could have been Chicago's most lucrative opera, I mean, the second night, the lines were around the block, closed. But obviously, I could not tolerate scandal. People like to say that after the death of my eldest son, I became more eccentric. Now, I was a very busy woman. I did not think it was unreasonable that I made my remaining children make an appointment with me if they wished to speak to me. I spent $25,000 having my astrological charts drawn up. I studied the occult and philosophy, and of course I communicated with my past incarnation, the childhood bride of King Tutankhamun, Asa Es and Pa'aten. I took the same walk every day. I built a zoo. Oh, I love giraffes with their lovely long necks. And I continued with my dinner parties. I would say to the man on my right, and what did you do today of interest? Then I'd turn to the man on my left and I'd say, and what did you do today of interest? I also built a mansion in Lake Forest, Villa Turacum, with 13 identical master bedrooms with 13 crates of identical uncrated furniture. No one ever spent a night in the house. The only difference in those master bedrooms is they were painted a different color. And in my spare time, I wrote passionate love songs, and I dedicated them all to my husband, who people like to say was unfaithful to me.
Trees are my friends and I like what they do. They make shade and clean the air and they're so beautiful. They grow tall and so big, bigger than me. Today I'm going to make a friend of a tree. To my friend I'll say, hello, how are you? And if my friend the tree is dry, I'll give it water too. I'll never hurt my friend the tree, so when I grow up, my friend the tree will still be here doing good things for me. Trees!
Hi, I'm Sarah Long. I'm the director of the North Suburban Library System. This is the information age, and sometimes we all get overwhelmed and don't know where to go. It's so confusing. Who can you trust? Can that internet site be real? Well, at your library, there's a professional behind the reference desk, and this person can really help you understand what's accurate, what can be believed.
Librarians can help you sort out the answers because you are being bombarded with information from everywhere. If you come to your library, if you call into your library, you have trained staff who know all the resources, can make evaluations of the sources that they're using to give you an answer, and have lots of ideas. And you get experienced librarians who have done this for years, who immediately know where they can direct you for an answer if it's not within the library walls. It's a great value for your tax dollar. You should use it.
Find the telephone number of your local public library and put it by your telephone. Remember, you can meet your information needs at the library.
Hi, y'all. What a pleasure for me to be here tonight. My name is Minna Everleigh, and my sister Ada couldn't be here, so I'm so sorry. We are known as the Everleigh sisters. We bought a famous Chicago madam, Effie Hankins, a little bordello on South Dearborn Street. It was a double mansion. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Our real name was not Everleigh. It was Lester. Where we got Everleigh for the Everleigh Club was in honor of our dear departed grandmother, who used to sign her letters in the Southern fashion. Everleigh yours. My sister and I came from a fine family in Louisville, Kentucky. Our daddy was a prominent lawyer. He adored his daughters. He sent us to the best finishing schools. You can probably tell by my dulcet tones. Oh, we were so foolish, though. After our daddy died prematurely, we up and married brothers who were brutish louts. So we left them and joined an acting company out of Washington, D.C. It folded in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, what were we going to do? Our daddy left us an inheritance of over $35,000. Inadvertently, one of the other actresses in our company gave us the idea. She said to me, "Do you know, Minna, if my mother knew that I was acting, she'd think it was as bad as working in a brothel." Aha! If men were such brutes, why not make them pay for it? So we hired ourselves a couple of girls, charged $10 an hour, $12 for a bottle of wine, and because the Trans-Mississippi exhibition was going on in Omaha, we had no lack of customers. till it closed. And then our customer base kind of dried up. We thought, it's time to move on. We went to New Orleans, New York, Boston, Detroit. Nothing seemed right until we came to Chicago. Why, there we bought Madam Effie Hankins' double mansion and renovated it. You know, when we left Omaha, we had doubled our inheritance from $35,000 to $70,000. And now we poured it all into the Everleigh Club. We had crystal chandeliers, a library with Moroccan-bound leather books, and we encouraged our ladies to read to better themselves. We fired most of Effie Hankins' girls and hired ourselves much more, well, shall we say, cultured young ladies. We designed a railway car buffet that was open 24 hours a day, serving nothing but the finest Southern cuisine. Meals back in 1900 started at $50. We had classical music played in orchestras, beautiful gilded pianos. Finally, it came time to open up our doors. February 1st, 1900. And I gave a speech to my ladies, and notice I didn't call them girls, that has gone down in the annals of prostitution as business smarts. I said, ladies, as I say, not calling you girls, you are not dressed in garters and corsets, and you will not be picked by the man. You will be introduced to your gentleman. And any lady that is introduced to a gentleman, why, she'll be treated like a lady. And I said, don't forget, one $50 customer is better than 5 $10 customers. Less wear and tear. And after all, ladies, you know, it's your beauty, and you must preserve it at all costs. So now go on out there and give. But give mysteriously, and be proud that you are a part of the Everleigh Club. Well, flock to us, some of New York, some of Chicago's finest, but not all. Some came, I think, just to see what was going on at the Everleigh Club. But I'll never forget one man from the northern country. I can tell you the story because it's in good taste. He paid $3,000 for this little ritual each time he paid us a visit. We like to see him come. He sat in the music room, fully clothed, bathed in baby spotlights, sipping sarsaparilla laced with vanilla ice cream. And then there was a piano player at the piano. 2 girls in front of him had buckets of ice, no larger than 2 inches square. He had a bell by his right hand, a little miniature horsehair mattress with a slit in it on his left hand, and at his signal, the piano player started playing Jingle Bells. He rang his bell, slipped his hand into the mattress, and said, "Woo, nothing like an old-fashioned sleigh ride." Go figure. I mean, but we were so happy to see him. $3,000 he paid for that. Actually, we took in about $3,000 a night and poured it all back into the Everleigh Club. We valued confidentiality. One night, a mayor's son, who shall go unnamed, gave a great bash at the Everleigh Club. He left me an IOU. The following day, someone else came to pay his bill. I refused to give it to him. After all, I would be admitting that he had been at the Everleigh Club. Protect confidentiality. Oh, you know, Prince Henry, the Kaiser's brother, he made a visit to Chicago, and he demanded to see the Everleigh Club. We put on a Dionysian feast. 30 of my girls, scantily dressed, dancing up a frenzy. And then butlers brought silver platters with raw sirloin. And those girls sunk their teeth into the sirloin. The prince's monocle popped right off his face. Later on, they were dancing on the tables when one of my girls' shoes fell in the prince's lap. He picked it up, and a little champagne had spilled in it. So he drank it so she wouldn't get her foot wet. I'll bet you didn't know that drinking champagne out of slippers originated at the Everleigh Club. you know what? There were also these nasty reformers that were trying to close down the bordellos. Can you imagine? We paid over $100,000 a year in protection money. And do you know to whom we paid it? Our own alderman, Bathhouse John Coughlin. But there was this really annoying reformer named Gypsy Smith. And unfortunately, in 1910, a wealthy railway magnate's son died after leaving the Everleigh Club. People said he was killed, you know, in a fight at the Everleigh Club. He had had too much to drink, and he died of heart failure. But that made another old rumor surface from 1905. Marshall Field's son had died of a gunshot wound. And any detective or police officer could tell you he died accidentally at home while cleaning a gun. However, the rumors were that he was killed at the Everleigh Club. So that Gypsy Smith, she went right to Mayor Carter Harrison, and we were closed by mayoral order. However, the night before we closed, I gave a party to end all parties. A reporter interviewed my sister and myself, and I said, what goes around comes around. And if the ship must go down, it's going down with a drink in my hand. And what I didn't say was a cool $1 million in cash in our pockets, priceless jewels, antique furniture, and furs. And so my sister, Ada, and I, why, we retired to New York as respected spinster sisters under assumed names. I thank y'all. Thank you. Now you agree, 4 very different ladies. How would you have loved to have Edith Rockefeller McCormick as a mother? However, do you know, it wasn't that unusual in the Victorian times for women to study the occult. It was kind of for a while, it was kind of a fashion. And of course, the Everleighs were a part of the colorful history of Chicago. Jane Addams will go down in history as one of the most wonderful do-gooders that we've had. And Mrs. Potter Palmer as a really elegant lady who was the first rich person to really put not only her money but her efforts behind women's issues, which was unusual in that time. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer? Maybe yes or no? Yes?
Now, where did these ladies die?
Well, the Everleigh sisters died under assumed names in New York. And Mrs. Potter Palmer died here in Chicago, as did Edith Rockefeller McCormick. It was interesting. She was a teetotaler, and her daughter that I mentioned, her favorite daughter, Muriel, who she started the kindergarten for, she died an alcoholic. The irony of everything, isn't it? I don't think that was a very happy family life, to say the least.